press event last year to promote this, and we got a decent story out of KOLD. So if Karen and I troubleshot this,
Let's see.
as well as we think we did, we'll be able to give you an overview in a news report, and then I'll break it out for you a little bit more.
Okay, I'll do it. And you keep an eye on the meeting or the room and let anybody in while I'm doing this.
Okay, that's fine.
All right.
Now, it can be hard for animals to quench their during droughts like the one the West has been in for years now. It can be hard for animals to quench their thirst. It can get very serious. Arizona Game and Fish and their partners are bringing water to wildlife. But as KOLD News 13's Megan McNeil explains, it's needed now more than ever before.
What you're seeing right here is not just a simple water line. It's an actual lifeline for wildlife here in southern Arizona. As the drought continues to scorch across the state, it's drying up this precious resource wildlife would die without. While some showers fell on Madera Canyon today, for wildlife in the area, they rely on volunteers like Spud with Arizona Game and Fish to bring them water.
Each year it's been getting a little worse, a little worse, a little worse.
He's hauling about 1,000 gallons to replenish this catchment so thirsty wildlife can take a drink. With the turn of a knob, this life-giving water rushes in. They have to get this water in, even with 2 hoses that don't fit. Providing this water is one of the most important ventures Game and Fish has, according to Spud.
This is going to become even more critical every year from now on. If we don't get the rain, either we do this and the animals will die. That's in this country will no longer exist.
Arizona Game and Fish will haul about 3 million gallons to catchments like this around the state. That's more than 500,000 more gallons than last year. The Tucson sector already pouring about 40% of what they did last year, with much more expected to come.
It's a very serious situation. Wildlife gets stressed too, but we can go to the faucet and take a drink of water.
Normally the program would take a break, but last year and this year, they've had to haul water year-round. From the Texas Canyon to the Dragoon Mountains to the Picacho area, the effects of the drought are being felt, but the consequences, they're not something Spud wants to think about.
You know, the consequences are horrific.
So they may pack up the hose today, but they'll be back, hoping to help nature endure. Once this reaches full capacity, this will only last wildlife about 3 months. Then Game and Fish will have to come back out here and fill it up again. Reporting here in Madera Canyon, Megan McNeil, KOLD News 13.
This program is partially run by donations, so if you'd like to help, we have information on our website. Also, Game and Fish asks you to contact them before hauling any water yourself. It's easy now. You can just do it on your phone. You just text, make a donation.
So that was me holding those 2 hose ends together. I have such a glamorous job. But that happens in the field. Unfortunately, we have to make do with what we've got. Thank goodness for our volunteers. So let me show you this, kind of break out what we just saw. This is one of my favorite photos.
The West has been in for years now. It can be hard
Is
for
that me?
animals to
Yeah, it's you.
quench their thirst. It can get very serious. Arizona Game and Fish
Where
and
is
their
it?
partners are bringing water to wildlife. But as KOLD News 13's Megan McNeil explains, it's needed now more than ever before.
Has she stopped? Yes, okay. Sorry about that.
And it's one of my favorite photos. The resolution's pretty bad on it, but that's a black bear, the first black bear sighting of 2021 in the Dos Cabezas wilderness. And this guy's taking a bath after coming out of semi-hibernation. It looks like a pretty happy camper. But it's but one example of the 60 catchments around southeastern Arizona that we work to keep filled, or at least have sufficient water to get us through until the monsoon comes in. So this is a classic catchment. This is actually the catchment we showed you in that news report. What these photos don't show you is the concrete apron that is tilted toward that drinker. When there is sufficient rainfall, the water runs off, hence the term catchment. It has an apron to catch water and keep that drinker full. But if there's no rain, we have to go out there and fill it ourselves. The truck is about 1,000 gallons, as mentioned in the news report. We can't always get the truck over to the catchment itself. So in this case, we ran a long hose, but didn't have the 2 connections we needed to reach all that way. So we held it together. We got that catchment filled. In very remote locations or not 4-wheel drive accessible, remember, we're pulling a trailer. So even if you had a vehicle capable of it, you might not be able to get the trailer into the backcountry where you need it. Helicopters equipped with these so-called Bambi buckets are used to replenish them. That typically, a mountain range that would be an example of using a helicopter operation, again, would be the Silver Bell Mountains, north and west of Tucson. The Wilcox Fire Department helped us shuttle water up again into the Dos Cabezas Mountains. They brought it into a location, we loaded it into our truck, and then drove it up to the catchment, a refurbished catchment. Coronado National Forest also has been helpful when the fire crews aren't busy putting out fires from time to time. Coronado National Forest water tenders will be used to bring the water in. Tucson Electric Power has been very generous with us. They have water trailers and have helped us haul water up to the Santa Rita Mountains in the past. Other notable help has come from fire departments in Tombstone and in Patagonia. And this program, as I mentioned earlier, would not be possible without the volunteers. The days of a wildlife officer going out to check these water catchments in his own unit are long gone. Demand for keeping these catchments full is too high, and their duties are expanding as well. So a number of volunteers, those that actually are going to haul the water, are trained. They get 4-wheel drive training. They get trailer training because they're going to have to go, oftentimes spending many hours to get out into the backcountry to keep these catchments full. The program works, and in addition to keeping to a minimum losses of wildlife due to drought and inaccessibility of water, drought also affects wildlife birth rate. An unhealthy ewe or doe is not going to successfully reproduce if they don't have a minimum of moisture. Most of these critters are desert adapted, and often the question comes up, well, how did they survive before? Well, we're dealing with climate change now and extreme drought conditions, so they need an assist from us. However, they don't need the kind of assist that all too often homeowners take on themselves with the best of intentions. And here are 2 examples. We're okay with people putting out small water sources to help wildlife during periods of extreme heat and drought. But typically we don't recommend that people put out more than a pie tin size container. Here we have on the left an example of a large water container someone put out ostensibly to attract, to keep wildlife watered, but he pulled in a bear. The mountain lion is also drinking from a little larger than we would recommend water container. This was taken off Sweetwater Drive. You can see the date. This from April of this year. Just overnight, we got a report from a guy up in the Saddlebrook area who said he had put out water for wildlife, again with the best of intentions, and he was sitting on his back porch watching a deer drink from this container he'd put out, and suddenly the deer disappeared. It got spooked. He didn't understand why, and lo and behold, mountain lion came in and started drinking from that container. So these are examples of what not to do. We understand that people want to help, but the best help they can give is to contribute to the Send Water campaign, because these wildlife waters are where they're supposed to be, in remote locations away from populated areas. You can see in the photo of the bear, the lights of Safford in the distance. That's still too close for comfort, and better they should be in wilderness areas or other places where they're more accessible to wildlife, so the wildlife doesn't come into town to try and get a drink of water or find food. So here's some quick stats about the Send Water program. So far this year, we've hauled 20,000 gallons of water. We've done that in 2 to 3 runs. Here at this time, we were at about 73,000 gallons. We were coming off a really rough year in 2020 when we ran water trucks out of Arizona Game and Fish, Tucson, almost on a daily basis, hauling 173,000 gallons of water in 2020. Statewide, there are some 3,000 catchments. We hauled 1.8 million gallons in 2020. That extreme drought condition was statewide. The annual cost of the Send Water program is $1 million, and thus far, since we stood up Send Water, $750,000 have been raised. But here's the thing, it's not enough, really. As much as we're hauling water, we cannot forestall impacts caused by drought and climate change through this activity alone. There aren't enough hours in a day, dollars to be spent, vehicles to be used, trailers, and not to mention staff time, although again, we're fortunate to have these very dedicated volunteers that go out there to do it. And it also, I mean, let's face it, we're a game management agency. And so, and we are impacted by lobbying, by special interest groups. All of these game species have special interest groups. And so, you know, a bighorn sheep catchment may get a little higher priority than some others, but we do the best we can to spread the water around and hit all those 60 catchments. And really, given what the need is, there probably need to be more catchments constructed. We do a pretty good job in partnership with the critter groups, as we call them. And we do 1 or 2 refurbishments a year, but it still isn't enough. And I have my window open. I've been anxiously watching the monsoon come in today. Things will ease up, and the situation will ease up once the rains come in. But we never know when we're going to get a totally dry year or a less than successful monsoon season, as happened in 2020. So it remains to be seen what 2022 holds for this program. That's about what I had for you on this. If you have questions, I'd be happy to take them at this point.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat, and also I just want to if we continue to have 20 years, like you said, this is not sustainable. I mean, we go into very critical times with the wildlife.
Yeah, we do. I don't think that TV news report was necessarily overstating the case. The problem is really knowing that we've lost wildlife to lack of water.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a lot of these creatures are desert adapted. Big desert bighorn sheep, like we've got on the Catalinas, get a lot of their moisture from vegetation. But if it's a really extreme situation like it was in 2020, and the prickly pear are turning brown by October, there's not much water source there. From time to time, we will come upon wildlife, say white-tailed deer or mule deer that are just dead. And we can't really tell why they haven't been attacked by, say, a predator like a mountain lion. No obvious signs of injury or disease. And they're always suspicious to us, but short of a necropsy, which is not really a practical thing to do unless there's an urgent need, we don't know for sure that's what happened. But we know almost with certainty that lack of water on the ground impacts reproduction. Probably the classic species that's impacted by water and reproduction is quail. Sportsmen are always asking us, what's the quail season, the quail hunting season like, or where are the quail? And the answer always is, it really is a function of how much rain we get in any given year. If we have good rainfall in a given year, there'll be a lot of quail on the ground in the fall. If we don't, the survival rate on those newborn chicks is going to be pretty low. So it's not only a question of birth rate, it's a question of survivability. Another species that's very delicate in terms of reproduction is bighorn sheep. As hardy and charismatic as they look, they have a relatively low survival rate on lambs. Maybe about 20% of the lambs born in a bighorn sheep herd survive. Other species, 50%, 75% would be more common. So every little aspect of that reproduction cycle is important. That's why, for example, if you hike the Push Ridge Wilderness, you'll see the bighorn sheep management area sign that say, don't bring dogs into this area ever. Stay on the trail between January and April 30, because that's when the lambs are being born, and any kind of disturbance greatly impacts their survivability.
I know when Mark first logged in, was just saying that this is such a heartwarming story that we're delivering the water, but it's a horrendous reason. So it's like a mix. So let me question here. Do you ever have conflicts with INS? They have been known to destroy water caches left to reduce immigrant deaths. I mean, has that ever happened where they objected to the catchment?
We hear from them from time to time because based on evidence on the ground, it's clear that migrants are using the water catchments to water themselves. And that's by debris and other things that's left around. It's really a hard situation to manage. These catchments are in remote locations. It's not our intent to give an assist to illegal immigration. We're trying to take care of the wildlife on the ground in the state of Arizona, but it does happen.
Yeah.
Not frequently, but it does happen.
And then another question is a donation list.
Oh, I would have to send that to you if you want to follow up. A
Okay.
donation you mean who has contributed?
Yes,
Or what do you mean
Sarah,
by that?
you're mute. Let me.
Yeah, I just want to know where to donate. And also
Oh,
word on Facebook.
the simplest way is to text in caps, send water.
Okay, you had that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, 41444, and it will open right up to the donation page.
Like I said, you're going to get a free seat reservation in the next live semester. This is all for that.
Imperfections of Zoom.
Also, I'm going to put the recording up on climatetucson.com this weekend, and I'll put a link as well.
That'd be great.
So you want to jump in? Any questions? You don't have to use the chat. We don't have that. Well, I'll ask another one. Are there other game and fish or fish and game departments do this sort of thing?
Yes, I'm sure U.S. Fish and Wildlife does at the wildlife refuges, and there's lots of BLM lands out there. But when the day is done, managing wildlife on the ground state functions, so we have primary responsibility for that. The feds manage the land, we manage the wildlife. So yes, I'm sure it does. I'm not as familiar with their program, but nothing to the extent we're doing it, because we have to be everywhere. And the Coronado National Forest, for example, is immense.
It's a mess?
It's immense. It's huge.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically all, most of our work is done on the ground in the Coronado National Forest.
Anyone?
So if you were to get volunteers, that would probably be the place they would be sent out of Tucson?
We do have a formal volunteer program that you can register for. It would take some training to get you up to speed on wildlife water catchment hauling because of the remoteness and ruggedness of the country. It's almost all four-wheel drive roads, and then you're towing 1,000 gallons of water in a trailer, so it can be a little tricky.
That's 8,000 pounds.
Yeah.
I'm a sailor. I know what they weigh.
But there are volunteer opportunities that are safer and easier to get involved with, like wildlife water catchment refurbishment, on the ground work of bringing these old catchments up to speed. Even something as simple as clearing leaf and other debris from one of these aprons that collect the water is a task that needs to be done. So yes, there are opportunities, but you'd have to jump through several hoops to actually go on our water haul. Although if somebody wanted to go with us sometime, I'd be happy to take anybody who wanted to see that operation.
Oh, that'd be nice. That'd be nice, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to set one up now. It'd be a media thing, but I've taken guests too, so they can see what that's all about. And typically they are not in the most remote locations we have these catchments. So it doesn't have to be all day, maybe half a day, we could knock it out.
That'd be interesting. So when this particular program began in 2019, but you have had these programs, like you said, the people on the ground would do it themselves in the areas, but what did you suddenly just, the department kind of say, oh, look, it's getting hotter, we should do something? Or how did it evolve? How did you come up with this?
Well, in an ideal world, it would have been that, but actually it was a little more complicated and gets into the politics of wildlife management. Because when you have, the Mule Deer Foundation and the Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society and all these groups, that, in fairness to them, they do a lot of work on the ground in terms of refurbishing catchments. Their volunteers go out and they help us dig these old a lot, and they see catchments getting low. And so the phone rings in the director's office.
Wow, that's great.
Those publics we're serving, we're saying, hey, what's going on with these catchments? And so that really forced our hand. But sure, a busy wildlife manager this wildlife management is not a growth field. It's getting increasingly difficult to recruit, believe it or not. It's a really cool job to be a wildlife officer. You got to get a 4-year degree, then you got to go to the law enforcement academy, and you patrol alone in remote locations covering hundreds of square miles. And we're just not bringing young people in like we used to.
Wow.
So we're kind of short-staffed all the time, and there are other things going on. So it's tougher for a guy to maintain all of his catchments.
Oh, that's interesting. Robert?
What about an intern program? Have you ever tried one of those for youth groups?
Interns have done catchment refurbishment work, but usually we don't have them long enough to train them in everything that's involved. You've got to come to the office at 7 in the morning, hook up the trailer, take it up to Marana, get it filled up, and then spend hours driving to these remote locations. And frankly, as well intended and enthusiastic as they can be, that could be a real challenge with a young person. Some of us who have come to us never having driven a 4-wheel drive truck, let alone hauling a water trailer with 1,000 gallons of water. And I've been in some tight situations with interns on the border where we've had breakdowns and so forth. So it's a good idea, but it's better at that experience level to have them work on refurbishing projects as opposed to actually hauling the water. And they do that.
Robert?
I was wondering how you decide how to allocate your budget between creating catchments and hauling water, and what kind of process you go through to try to decide how big an earthworks or a catch area you do. Because I mean, I imagine that even with a fairly large collection area, that may not suffice to get through dry periods.
Well, no, they don't. You're right about that. I'm 1 or 2 parts removed from our development branch, which undertakes a range of projects on the ground in any given year. Not just building new catchments, but it's really more cost effective unless there's something structurally so out of hand to refurbish the ones we've got, as opposed to build new ones. It's just more cost effective, particularly when we don't have to use contractors to refurbish a catchment necessarily. We can pull in volunteers. I mean, it's hot, dirty work. We're digging up stuff and pouring concrete and so forth. So, but I don't know that I can answer your question with clarity, other than I know development branch is always slammed with projects, and we want something done, we've usually got to wait a while.
It just sounds like it could be a short-term, long-term decision-making problem, because, building a catchment might be more cost-effective in the long term, but doesn't solve an immediate problem.
Right, and also, just the process of targeting where to put them, because rainfall patterns are so spotty in southeastern Arizona. So, 1 year you may be flush in Cochise County, and then the next year you've got nothing. So there's a science to that I'm really not involved with, but where's the best place for catchment?
Could I ask about your viewpoint about catching water off your roof and using that? Do you think that impedes natural water flow in the city?
Could you rephrase the question? I didn't quite follow.
Yeah, we're fairly new to Tucson, and we're going to put in a catchment system on our roof. What's your viewpoint about the need for free-flowing water in areas in the city of Tucson?
Well, I mean, a catchment is supposed to be a sort of water capture method, right? They're designed that way.
Yeah.
So, and people harvesting rainwater is obviously something we would support, but it could become political as we head into, I mean, what are we talking about? Water restrictions next year because the Colorado River is so low? Well, what does that do to efforts like ours to provide water on the ground for wildlife? Is that going to become an issue down the road? It could. So yeah, we're down with the concept of rainwater harvesting, and that's what we're trying to do with our catchments, and that used to work pretty well.
Yeah.
But when we've got, I mean, the one we showed you in the news clip in the beginning has a huge apron for collecting rainwater when it rains. And it just wasn't collecting enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you have any estimate on, this is a silly question, but how many animals we have, and what's the population of, how would you do that with the water needs and the population? We have a lot of animals.
Yeah, we really do. I'll give you a couple of examples. In the Catalina Mountains alone, we estimate there are 4,000 white-tailed deer.
Oh, okay.
And in the Rincons and the Catalinas, which are essentially connected by Reddington Pass, there could be as many as 67 mountain lions.
Wow.
Okay.
And for the game species that are countable, I mean, bears and mountain lions are 2 species. They're impossible to really count. But we fly big game surveys every January for those species that we can't count, typically deer and javelina, pronghorn antelope. That's how the number of hunting licenses to let in any given year for any given area are determined. We have to make sure that we've got a population estimate so that we don't let more tags than would be unsustainable. And of course, you know, for the hunters out there, that can be a source of contention, but science has to inform our decisions. We can't ever get to where we were pre-1930s before these state wildlife management agencies were stood up and it was a free-for-all out there. It's got to be scientifically decided. So, but you know, think about the 67 mountain lions. That's a lot of mountain lions, right?
Yeah.
And part of the reason we have so many mountain lions up in the Catalinas of the Rincons is because there's so many white-tailed deer.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Now, but didn't when they released the bighorn,
Oh yeah.
weren't they afraid? Weren't they concerned that but for a while there, the mountain lions were killing a number of the bighorns. But didn't that just kind of even out?
That's a good question, and it gets to mountain lion biology. Not all mountain lions eat bighorn sheep. They're too hard to prey on. They have very keen eyesight. They're excellent climbers. They favor habitat with clear lines of sight. So you know, a deer or javelina is a much easier catch. But some mountain lions are really good at it. And how they figure out the riddle of killing bighorn sheep is something we'd like to understand better. Yeah, I mean, the carrying capacity for bighorn sheep in the Catalinas at best is 100 to 120. Right now, we've got about 75.
Yeah.
And, you know, we'll know probably this year when we do a survey of what the population is going to look like moving forward. We don't take mountain lions. The controversy about that project was taking in lot 30, mainly out of mountain ranges in the Yuma area. But a mountain lion that was adept at killing bighorn sheep could have wiped out that first lot of 30 in a year, and we'd have had none.
So that's how many were released, 30?
We released 3 batches of 30 in consecutive years, 2013 through 15.
Okay.
And then in 2016, we put 20 more on the ground and stopped the mountain lion taking. And so it's, you know, we know mountain lions are killing bighorn sheep up there now, but they can sustain the losses. And we've also been fortunate with that bighorn herd because survival rate for bighorns there, as opposed to the normal numbers, about 25%, we've been having about 50% lamb survivability in the Catalinas. So that's good. Yeah.
They're having a big problem up in Northern California with the Thule elk that they reintroduced, and the cat and the dairy cows and the cattle.
Well, the difference is mountain lion hunting is illegal in California.
Oh,
Yeah, it's illegal, and
oh, nice.
yeah, and so they've got a lot more predation issues to deal with over there. It's not illegal for the State Wildlife Management Agency to take mountain lions that kill livestock, and I'm sure they do a fair amount of that. And they also, I mean, you hear crazy stories in California of mountain lions walking into office buildings and mountain lions scavenging stuff. They're really not scavengers, but that state is so populated that they really don't have enough habitat.
Yeah.
So it's kind of different. All the states are a little different in how they manage mountain lions.
Could you speak for a bit about the impact on some of the small species in our desert? For example, the horny toad, which I know is not a lizard, and some of the aquatic animals, the fish and the amphibians.
Specific to drought, I don't think I can answer your question, but one of the things that we do is, and it doesn't really pop up on the public radar very much, we do a lot, in addition to the run-of-the-mill sport fish stocking, you know, the rainbow trout, in the summer and the channel catfish in the winter. We have dedicated programs to restoring native amphibians and reptiles that are ongoing, things like Chiricahua leopard frogs. We have safe harbor agreements with landowners that if they can assure us that the waters will be year-round and will help, they'll let us eradicate bullfrogs. We'll put Gila top minnow and Gila chub in on a landowner's property to further those species existence in our region. That's actually been quite successful. In this past year, we put in longfin, in past 2 years, we put in longfin dace and Gila top minnow into the Santa Cruz, which, you know, nobody ever thought that would ever happen again. They did occur naturally in different places along the Santa Cruz and survived. We think they were coming out of a population we put in high in the Catalinas that worked its way down into the river and ultimately over to the Santa Cruz. But the Santa Cruz River, for the first time in decades, has Gila top minnow and longfin dace in the waters downtown. And the county and the city, for their part, have done a much better job of treating wastewater effluent so that we can have those fish in there.
Good news.
Yeah, that is, yeah. I mean, it's one of those kind of, some people don't care about that stuff, but we do. They're just tiny little fish, you know, you can't fish them.
But they're back. They're back. Robert, do you have a question? Your hand's up.
Sorry, I forgot to put it down.
Okay. But one that kind of, I don't know, it's off the subject, but it's a subject. Do you get involved with people coming, I mean, reading the stories about coming down and trying to grab our, you know, Colorado River toads and milk them for psychedelics?
Yep. Yep. We had a number of inquiries about that. I don't get it, but I guess some people think that's pretty cool. And once the monsoon comes in, we're going to have illegal reptile snatchers out there. Typically, we'll run patrols on back roads during the monsoon season at night, and we'll roll up on these illegal reptile trappers. But there's quite a significant trade in that. And occasionally we'll have a Gila monster in residence in the office that's been seized in one of these things. But
Isn't that crazy?
yeah, it's part of our law enforcement program.
So you spend a lot of the summer doing that. It's that popular?
Well, it's enough to keep a couple of wildlife officers busy on the monsoon season back roads at night. Yeah, we do quite a bit of that. And of course, we get reports often of, you know, one of our best sources for law enforcement these days is Facebook. Poachers and others involved in illegal activity just got to brag about it.
That's right.
And they put it on Facebook and we find it.
Good.
Well, I've always heard that, you know, crooks aren't that smart. I mean.
Well, obviously we wish they were dumber and we'd make more cases, but
It's true.
when we get stuck for a good lead, because a lot of these crimes occur in remote locations with few witnesses, but there's always loose talk around the water cooler or the dumb Facebook post. And we have a program called Operation Game Thief, and we will offer rewards for information leading to an arrest of anywhere from $500 to $1,500. Most recent case like that is somebody up around the Tucson Mountain foothills, whether by accident or intention, we don't know, shot a javelina in the face and it survived. And we're offering a $1,500 reward for information leading to an arrest in that case.
It survived?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's still alive, but when we got the imagery on it, you know, one thing that's helped our business a lot is the rise of trail cameras and range security cameras, because people get a lot of documentation, and when they make reports to us, often we have photos or video. And yeah, this poor thing had been shot right in the cheek with an arrow.
With an arrow?
With an arrow. And the same thing had happened a year ago at this time.
Whoa.
Yeah, happens a lot. Unfortunately, I'll say this, when we put these rewards out there, we get good news media coverage. You know, people in Tucson are very keen about animals generally. This is a good animal rights community, but wildlife in particular, and people get really upset about these stories. Probably it's you know, the thing we get the most public support for is enforcement. And we're busy.
Yeah, Tucsonans are great. So
Yeah,
and one other quick question. When the catchments, are you allowed to do that on tribal lands or not?
No, we do not manage wildlife on tribal lands. That's a tribal function.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Do you
mean, if
work
they asked us for
with-
help, we would help.
Okay.
Yeah, if they need an assist, they can call us and we assist on a variety of things. A bear on near Kitt Peak a couple of years ago is one I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, Kitt Peak. I hope everything's okay up at Kitt Peak.
I saw a weather service advisory today about, you know, the problem after a fire is rock slides
Oh,
and mudslides.
oh yeah.
So they're on the lookout for that today.
Well, it's a different world. Anybody else have questions? Anything about wildlife or?
I was just wondering if the border wall construction has impacted you at all. I know that's supposed to be affecting migration routes and can cause some flooding issues and stuff like that, but
Yeah,
is that having any impact on you?
the Biden administration is working on those places where there's water courses, I know, and there's supposed to be a fix for that. Karen and I were talking about this before you all joined in. There was a time early in the Trump administration when no one in the federal government would acknowledge that the 30-foot border wall would have an impact on wildlife. It was absolutely a no-brainer from where we sat because we know that highways and fences impede the movement of wildlife. So obviously a 30-foot border wall would. One of the species that was causing a lot of public concern was the jaguar, which we do have one here, and at one point may have had as many as 3. That would be 2016, all of which presumably came up from Sonora. There's a breeding population down there. We have imagery of mountain lions and bears climbing the old 18-foot wall. And before the 30-foot wall went in, the border wall was a patchwork affair of barbed wire fence and Normandy-style traffic barriers and this 18-foot fence, and wildlife was managing to navigate it. But the jaguar that's been in the Chiricahua Mountains since 2016 and is still there based on recent trail camera imagery is probably marooned there. It won't be able to follow its presumed route up to get back to Mexico, and they do go back. But that's just the biggest, highest profile species impacted. Right now, current plans call for 8.5 by 11 wildlife openings in the new 30-foot wall, but that clearly cannot accommodate a large mammal, and because it can accommodate a person, right? So it can only be that size. So ocelots and other smaller critters are going to be able to get through, but not the big ones. But here's the bottom line on that. We don't think anything's going to go extinct on any side of that wall because of the wall, but we spend a lot of time trying to open up as much habitat as possible for wildlife. Case in point, in Sonoita, the pronghorn antelope herd down there was down to about 75 individuals in 2012. Today it numbers close to 300, largely because of habitat work. And one of the things that we did was remove the bottom strand of barbed wire from miles and miles of ranch fencing so that the pronghorn would go under the fences and thereby use all the available habitat. They won't jump a fence, even though they easily could, but they'll go under a fence. So that's just one example of barriers to wildlife movement that even something simple as a barbed wire fence could cause. We know there was cross-border movement of pronghorn antelope from the San Rafael Valley down to Mexico, and other species, bears, mountain lions, in that country, probably mule deer too. So they have less habitat to work with, for sure. But we just don't think, we think in something being expatriated off the landscape because of the wall. I mean, it could happen, and the environmental groups have made the case that it will happen, but we don't have any data.
Oh,
I think one of the other species that was impacted was the Mexican gray wolf, right? There was quite a bit of crossing before the wall went in.
Actually, the Mexican gray wolf population in Arizona is in the White Mountains and in New Mexico. Occasionally, a Mexican wolf will come up from Chihuahua into Arizona, but it's only happened on a handful of occasions in the past 10 years. And we know that because Mexico is piloting reintroduction of Mexican wolves just like we are. And so often these wolves have radio collars, so we know where they are. But typically not all. That's expensive to do, and it's usually 1 in 3 critters in a group that is released that has a radio collar. Interestingly, the place where Mexican wolves were once abundant were right down here, but it was not the area chosen for the reintroduction.
Could you say a bit about Mexican bear? Are they crossing back and forth?
We think the Huachuca Mountains has an extremely healthy bear population because bears come up from Mexico. There's other factors involved. That range has not a lot of road access. It's almost a 4-wheel drive on the eastern slope. The western slope has less roads and lots of springs. So it's really good bear country. And if there's a mountain range that's been problematic for bears over the years, it's that one. The southern tip of the Huachucas goes right down to the border at a place called Montezuma Pass. However, that 30-foot wall is in place there now. So if you stand at Montezuma Pass, you can see it stretching to the horizon.
Okay.
So maybe it's not going to be the bear habitat it once was, but that was our impression. They were coming up from Mexico.
Is there any
Black bears only in Arizona, by the way.
Black bear?
Black bears only. No grizzlies.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'll say.
Although I've heard the black bear are more aggressive than grizzlies.
Oh,
I'm a little dubious on that. That's an interesting species because it's an omnivore, right? It'll eat just about anything. And it's shy, but it's curious. And so typically its first reaction when it encounters people is to skedaddle. But sometimes their curiosity gets the better of them, particularly, they can smell food a mile off. So if people are careless with their garbage in residential areas above elevation 5,000, or if campers don't secure their food, bears will come in. Just this past week, a guy was camped out on Mount Bigelow below the radio towers, and a bear walked right into his camp. The bear didn't notice him at first. He didn't notice the bear at first. They got to look at each other, and the bear scampered off. And the guy ran away. So it happens, but they're very unpredictable, and they can go off at a moment's notice, and you never can be quite sure why. Case in point, we had a birder, a very experienced backcountry guy in the Santa Rita Mountains a few years back, was charged by a bear from a distance of 50 yards at a dead run. He remembered all the things we tell people to do, which is stand your ground, wave your arms, yell, throw stuff. And the bear charged right up to within 10 yards of him, stopped on a dime, turned around, and ran back the other way. And what we subsequently learned was that bear, in all probability, had 2 cubs with her that were not seen by that guy. It was a purely defensive thing. But you couldn't tell that the guy who stood up to a bear charging him at a dead run at 50 yards.
Never run, that's what they say.
No, don't run. You should face forward and do all those other things. But yeah, sorry, that's my phone. I got sonar because so many sonar ringtone because so many phones are going off my office. I always know which one is mine. Kind of annoying.
Well, I guess one question, are there, in our area, are there any animals on the endangered list or close to it that,
Oh, yeah.
that climate change is going to threaten even more?
Oh, boy. The list-
Accelerate?
I would have to get you a list, Karen. It's a long list of
Is it?
endangered and threatened species. The big gun would be the jaguar, of course. Owls, which are using a habitat in Mount Lemon. I mean, they're displaced when there's fire, right? That was one of the concerns when the bighorn fire happened 2 years ago, of the impact on old growth forests. But yeah, it's a long list of mammals, amphibians, reptiles that are endangered. I mean, that's one of the great things about living in southeastern Arizona is the biologic diversity. But a lot of these critters are, you know, endangered, threatened, or of species of concern, as they're known.
Yeah, we're rich in plant life and animal life in this part of the Sonoran Desert. So
Yeah, and the habitat's so varied, right? Because we have this Sonoran Desert environment, but then we have grasslands like we have in Sonoita, expansive grasslands actually, as well as near Wilcox. And then we have, you know, pine forests at elevation 8,000 or 9,000 and everything in between. You just drive the Catalina Highway and you get the full spectrum, right? So yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why wildlife is so abundant here. It's just not Sonoran Desert, it's everything else.
we're fortunate. Again, it's good news and good news and not so good news, but knowing what's ahead might be helpful.
Well, you know, wildlife management is public policy. And so to the extent citizens are informed about these issues, which can be very nuanced, I know that at the level of, my job is harder than my counterparts' jobs in other parts of the state because of this genuine concern, greater than average concern by citizenry about these issues, environmental issues. And it can be a challenge to walk the line because after all, I work for a hunting and fishing agency and those two worlds don't always meet, but we came together on the Catalina Bighorn Sheep Project. I mean, we had the blue chip environmental groups at the table when we did that, despite that controversial predator management plan we executed. So we can work in partnership on issues, but unless people know what's going on, where's the incentive?
That's right. That's right.
And you guys know that, given what your cause is here.
Does anyone have anything else? This has been really interesting. Can you email me the list?
Yes, I can.
Or is it on the website? I can go look, but.
I'd rather find it for you. It'd be too hard for me to direct you to the website.
Okay. And anybody else want anything from him? Give him your email. I mean, if you have any questions or.
I'd like that list as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much. This has been so interesting.
I'm glad. And I thank you for inviting me to speak to you, and let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. Well, and my email is Karen, K-A-R-E-N, at climatetucson.com. So if you have any questions from Mark, you could send to me and I'll forward them to him.
Please do.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you all for coming. And next week, there's another program next week. I took a little hiatus from Climate Tucson for a while because honestly, I got confused because I knew what I was doing. I was education. I wanted a lot of education about climate. We've got a lot of climatologists in our area. And then the climate hit us. Then it wasn't coming. It came. You know, with the heat, the crazy extreme monsoon, all of this stuff kind of hit, and there was no longer a question. And I thought, well, we don't really need to be educated now because we're living it. So what do we talk about? So I'm kind of pivoting. So hopefully you'll come to the next meeting. I'll be posting it. And I really thank you, Mark, for all of this. This has been really interesting. And we all appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. It was nice spending time with you.
Okay. We'll be in touch.
I'd be happy to give a presentation on solutions, how you can be negative emissions lifestyle, I've got a,
Absolutely. And I know that I know who to call on with that.
yeah, so I'd be happy to do that.
That'd be
I've
great. Yeah.
many organizations recently, and I get good feedback, so.
I know, and I just saw something from the some group, anyway, it's like only 2% of households and maybe 5% of businesses have done any upgrades, energy-wise, energy efficiency upgrades at all. And that's a huge contributor to greenhouse gas. Anyway, all right. Nice
Have a
to
good
meet
evening.
all of you. Thank you.
Here.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.